The longest-serving member of the House of Representatives is denying accusations of sexual harassment. BuzzFeed reports Democratic Congressman John Conyers paid a woman more than $27,000 from his office budget in 2015 to settle a complaint. And the woman claims that Conyers fired her because she did not submit to his sexual advances. Other former staffers also allege Conyers made repeated requests for sexual favors. Conyers has since spoken to the Associated Press and denied that he settled a complaint with a staff member. In a statement, House Speaker Paul Ryan said, quote, "This report is extremely troubling. Last month, I directed the Committee on House Administration to conduct a full review of all policies and procedures related to workplace harassment and discrimination. Additional reforms to the system are under consideration as the committee continues its review. People who work in the House deserve and are entitled to a workplace without harassment or discrimination." To discuss it all now, let us bring in Sean Sullivan. He is a congressional reporter for the Washington Post, and he joins me now from D.C. So, Sean, let's begin with the statement from Paul Ryan. What do you make of it? Just how much pressure do you think the Speaker is under to do more on sexual harassment?
Well, I think he's under a lot of pressure as we see more and more of these accusations and allegations come out. It's going to be on the leaders in Congress. It's going to be on people like Paul Ryan, people like Mitch McConnell, to show the public and to show members and to show staff who work on Capitol Hill that he is committed to creating an environment where these kinds of things don't happen, or if they do happen, that there are the proper channels to report them and that there are consequences for these actions. And I think you see that in the statement that Paul Ryan put out today. He's calling them a pretty serious allegation with regard to this latest accusation, and so he is under a tremendous amount of pressure, to show the public that he is doing something about a problem that a lot of people think has been a long-running problem on Capitol Hill.
In that statement, he mentions additional reforms that are under consideration. Do you have any idea what specific steps they are pondering or that may be on the table?
Yeah, lawmakers are talking about this right now. One has put forward an idea to make it easier or speedier to report these accusations. Another idea out there is to have a mandatory survey where you would have members, staffers on Capitol Hill essentially reporting their experiences so that there can be a bigger, broader snapshot of what's actually going on the Hill, to give leaders a sense of the extent and the scope of this problem. So there are ideas out there. I think you're going to see pressure continue to be put on Ryan and others to take further steps. They have taken some steps to require mandatory anti-harassment, anti-discrimination training. But again, I think you're going to see more pressure to do more, to go even further to combat this.
Speaking of that bigger, broader picture, in talking to lawmakers and aides on Capitol Hill, is there an expectation that there are more shoes to drop? There will be more allegations? This is really just the beginning?
Yeah, there are some people who believe this is just the beginning and that we're going to see more of this, and that this is not, a situation where you have some isolated instances here and there. And we're seeing this, all across society right now, all across various different industries. And so I think what we're seeing right now is Capitol Hill, politics, government is, by no means exempt from some of the problems that we've seen happen in other industries. And some people believe it could potentially be worse possibly than it is in other places. And so, time will tell. But there are people who believe this is just the beginning and that we're going to see a lot more of these types of allegations come out in the coming weeks and months.
All right. So then, keeping that in mind, we talk a little bit about the position that the president is in. He's certainly chosen to avoid the allegations against Roy Moore, making comments on it. He did not avoid making comments on Al Franken and the allegations against him. He seems to be picking and choosing who he wants to sort of attack in regards to these harassment claims. Is he going to find himself, though, increasingly in a position where he's going to have to sort of come out on one side or another, a clear expression of where he stands on harassment?
Well, there are a lot of people, I think, who want to see him make that clear expression. But when you look at this situation, you're right, number one, that he has been seeming to pick who he wants to attack, who he wants to defend, and who he wants to stay silent on. And there's also another complication in this entire situation, which is that the president himself has been accused of sexual harassment by women. He's denied those allegations, but those accusations continue to surround him. And what that's also done is it's raised questions from other Republican lawmakers. You know, you have a lot of Republicans right now speaking out against speaking out about the accusations that Roy Moore in Alabama is facing right now, saying that they believe his accusers. Well, when those same Republican lawmakers are asked about whether they believe the women who have accused Trump, a lot of them don't want to answer that. So, you know, when Trump does weigh in some situations and not others, and when you have a situation like the Roy Moore situation, it creates a lot of questions for the party. And I think a lot of people right now are scratching their head and wondering why the president is acting the way he is and choosing to weigh in some circumstances and not others. It's created a lot of confusion, I think.
Really? You know, the other thing that I think is sort of remarkable about Speaker Ryan's comments is that he has tried very hard to avoid commenting on many of the things that are occurring in and around Washington, D.C., many of the controversies. He wants to talk about taxes. He does these, press conferences, and he wants to focus on the hard work of tax reform. So here, he did make a statement, but I'm wondering, is there concern among the Republican Party, within the Republican Party, that, these distractions are just going to make it tougher to pass that tax reform that they've been working so hard on, and that they want to get done before Christmas?
That's right. They're racing against the clock right now. They're trying to get this done by the end of this year. And on the whole, this has been a year that has been a very unsuccessful one for the Republicans. They've not been able to pass any major legislation. So they see the tax bill as a chance to finally show the American public, hey, we can actually govern, we can actually produce something. And these allegations certainly do complicate that. When you look at the Senate right now, they haven't passed their tax bill yet. They're trying to do it when they get back from the Thanksgiving holiday in early December. I just mentioned Roy Moore in Alabama. Well, if he loses that race, what you have is a seat that has long been in Republican hands in the Senate going into Democratic hands. And if the Senate can't pass their tax reform bill before that seat flips, that's one fewer Republican vote they can count on in their tax reform efforts. So that is something that Republican leaders are watching closely. They're trying to pass that bill so that it can get done before that election, which is on December 12th. And so their position is, look, even if the Democrat does end up winning the seat, we're hoping we can pass this thing before that time so that it doesn't really matter. But certainly, there's a lot of variables right now that Republicans are looking at and a lot of distractions that they're facing.
Sean, before I let you go, I want to ask you another question. You brought up Roy Moore, and, we heard Kellyanne Conway earlier in the week sort of waffle on whether or not she wanted Republicans to vote for Roy Moore, but she certainly wanted someone who would support the president's agenda. Huckabee Sanders had the same message. When I think of Roy Moore, though, I think of a guy who's a rebel. Why do you think the Republicans, at least the ones in the White House, why do you think the White House thinks that Roy Moore would be a good Republican to sit in the Senate, one that would support the Trump administration's endeavors?
Yeah, it's a good question because you're right. He has been a rebel. He is somebody who has run against the Republican establishment. And it's not clear that he's going to support the Republican agenda on big issues, whether it's taxes, whether it's health care, whether it's other issues. But I think they look at this situation, they look at Doug Jones, who's a Democrat, and they say, this is somebody who's really not going to be with us on the majority of these issues. And with Roy Moore, we have somebody who at least we have a better chance of trying to work with, trying to persuade in some of these key votes to side with us. And they've concluded, I think, that the Democrat is just not somebody who they can work with. And so that's why we're starting to see them talk about this. But you're right, it is a risk. I mean, aside from associating himself with Roy Moore, who is certainly very embattled right now, is facing numerous accusations of sexual misconduct. It's not clear that he is really going to support Mitch McConnell even for majority leader. He's run against him openly. And so if he were to come to Washington, it really is an open question of when he'll side with the Republican Party and when he'll just go his own way and do his own thing.
Right, a roll of the dice. Sean Sullivan of the Washington Post, thank you so much, Sean.
Thanks, Anne Marie.